Well, welcome back to the next edition of the DFS Down Under Show, presented by Draftstars. Draftstars, as always, your number one daily fantasy platform, offering Australian and New Zealand customers the win huge cash prizes on daily fantasy AFL. I'm your host here, Smatho, and Big Hef is next to me for another bumper edition of the Down Under Show. This is round 15, Thursday and Friday night AFL coming at you. Before we get stuck into it, how are you, Hef?
I'm good, Smatho. It's a bit of deja vu on tonight's show, actually, because both games that we are doing tonight, we did earlier in the season. So we'll see if we've learned anything from back then.
Yes, my long-term memory actually worked. I thought, haven't we done this before? So the Lions and Cats on Thursday night, they actually played in round 2. And then obviously the next game, which will be the Tigers and the Saints, we'll cover off that later on. Now, as always, if you're watching the stream live here on Draftstars Facebook or on Twitter, give us a little thumbs up. If you're watching on our YouTube page at Daily Fantasy Rankings, a little like there for us as well, because obviously Daily Fantasy Rankings is Australia's number one resource for Australian AFL Daily Fantasy. Let's get stuck into the show. Now, as always, before we get into the two games, the Schmaffo's little thumbs up for our golden ticket winners who are going to the big dance here in Melbourne. Let me bring up the recent winners here. Only just the 9 last week after a bumper crop the week before. But look at these names, Hef, and obviously there's one that really stands out for you. But very nice hand, good. Was it very nice hand, good game?
Good
Good name. That's a great name. It's one of the best DFS names.
I run out on the end. What's the HHG?
Very nice hand, good game. G.
It's very could have been, isn't it?
Could have been.
RHG.
Then there's Lemooses. Now the Undertaker, he's come back from the dead to snag a ticket. Gigites? Is that Gigites? And then Giddy, Instagarter, the WA Jet, and then I think it's J Sack 69. maybe we could.
Well, there's been a lot of 69s win tickets, Smatho. What's going on there? Seems very popular.
Number. Very popular number. Benny shows one, and then obviously a favourite of ours, Briz 17. Viewers of the show knows he's a big fan, and obviously we do know the Bristle Man, so he will be coming to the live event for the golden ticket.
Bristle Man, if you haven't seen, jump on the Daily Fantasy Rankings YouTube channel. There's an interview with him at the last live event, which is worth a look. Big Bristle Man.
Yes. Whenever I come up interview guys, they seem to lose because he was in the top position in the third quarter before
he was leading at 3/4 time, wasn't he? And just completely bombed the last quarter, the poor bloke. But he'll be back for another crack.
So congratulations to all those golden ticket winners. 2 thumbs up for you. We're looking forward to catching up. Hef, do you want to have a guess how many tickets left?
I'm guessing there's going to be 63 left.
Oh, no, you have to be under on that. We're down to 57. There was an NBA ticket today, which will go into a playoff on tomorrow. So, we're nearly at over 100 tickets being allocated to our Draftstars entrance. So, yes, we're starting to get into the stage where you might have to start thinking about get involved. All right, draftstars.com.au for all those terms and conditions as well. All right, mate, let's have a look at some footy. First up is Brisbane Lions are hosting the Geelong Cats up at the Gabba. Now, take note, the time start changed today on Wednesday. It's now 7:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. It's been pushed out by 10 minutes. Currently, the Lions are $1.68 favourites, and the line is 5.5 with a total of 163.5. Now, the weather in Brisbane, it's forecasting late rain, late showers, but only a small amount at best. So at this stage, I'm not really factoring this into our preview tonight, but you just never know that the old Gabba slickness might return like from 2020. So we actually start here on Thursday with a $75,000 contest presented by Draftstars, $7,400 for the winner. I've got a little banner here to show everyone just before we go. So where are we? This one has all the details there. So ignore the 7:20 p.m. time. It is 7:30. You got an extra 10 minutes, $15, $7,450. First prize. Other contests include the high roller, the mini, the micro, the fiver, the single entry. Now, Hef, talk me about this team news that came out earlier this evening. Dane Zorko is back after his suspension. The barometer is out again. There's another show that we were going to talk him up, but obviously he's no longer with us. And Tommy Berry was the med sub that he wasn't used last week. Whereas for Geelong, Henderson is in for now. He was a laid out last week. Also, we lost Mitch Duncan, who's had a serious knee injury, and Quinton Narkle, which we thought we didn't preview last week, but he got a game, and then obviously he's out again. So, any thoughts on those particular team changes? It seemed to be very like this one.
Narkle looks like he'll be the sub for Geelong. They've been pretty consistent in their use of the subs. I'd expect him to be the sub. We did talk about last week the option of playing him as the sub. I'm not sure we'll quite go to those lengths. Consider that in this game, there's a little bit more value around. The thing to note is that last week when Henderson came out and they brought Narkle in, it sort of threw everything out. We'd been talking about O'Connor tagging in the middle of the ground. Interesting now that they bring Henderson back in. I'd expect maybe there's a chance that O'Connor returns to the middle of the ground. What do you think about that, Smatho?
It'll be something of a surprise after we jumped on him last week, obviously with his role, but that didn't really eventuate.
No, I think because Henderson was out, I think that pushed O'Connor out to go and play back, and they brought Narkle in to play in the midfield instead. Obviously, Higgins, he's a bit outside to sort of replace Duncan to a degree, but I think Narkle going out of the side, Henderson comes in the back line, and they did talk during the week that someone's going to have to pay some attention to Lachie Neale. So I'm thinking that O'Connor goes back in the middle to tag Neale this time. But as we know with Geelong, they're quite happy to move the magnets around an hour before the match. So you have to pay attention every time there's a Geelong game on what happens late, because that had a pretty big impact last week, those late changes.
We might have to start doing shows at 1 hour before lock when we do Cats Cans from now on.
Hello shows.
And then do the proper preview. Now, obviously, we get on to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au and we check out all the free resources that you can use for your DFS lineups. And here are my notes for this week. Very similar to last week because we did the Cats game last week. So obviously the Cats give up the least amount of fantasy points to backs. However, the Lions are pretty much line ball and matching them as well. So looks like the backs is going to be a bit of a wasteland here. No one from Brisbane scored over 100 fantasy points back in round 2 against the Cats. The Lions are in their last 5 matches a clear number 1 for total fantasy points scored against them. So they're restricting teams. So it's an average of 1390 points per the opposition. And then the Lions' last 5 games have reduced the opposition ruck scoring to an average of 68. So they were a bit of a target against the rucks, but not recently. So any other news or notes that you picked up from DFR?
Well, I'm going to one-up you there on that 100 fantasy point stat. No one scored 100 in the preliminary final last year either. But, of course, they had shorter quarters there, so not as important. Interesting, though, that in that game, Neale got 99. No one else from Brisbane got more than 71. So that's pretty telling. That so 2 games, really, that we've seen basically one score above 100 when you're taking it to account adjusted minutes, and that was Neale, and he may cop a tag. So, obviously Geelong beat them quite easily last year up at the Gabba, and you cast your mind back to last year. Brisbane were going pretty well, and these 2 teams played at the SCG, and Geelong got hold of them there too. So, Brisbane they'd have to be a little bit nervous going into this, because Geelong, even though they were lucky to beat them down in Geelong earlier in the year, once the season's got up and going, they have had their measure a bit in recent times.
All right. Let's look at these 2 teams as they line up here on Draftstars. We're in the $75,000 contest here, 125 max entry. We start, as always, in the rucked position, and we've got 4 options here this week. We're going to make a note straight away that Mark Lifsas has lost his DPP status. So he's a straight-out ruck now at 11,740. He's up against Oscar Bacanoni at 10,600 and Joe Danaher at 10,340 Lions. And then obviously Rasava Radigalia brings it up here at 8,960. Look, they've both been pretty good lately in terms of fantasy scoring. Blixars did salute last year with a 90. McInerney went down to Hobart and did pretty well with an 83. Dyoher, I was on strong pretty last week against the Kangaroos and did not much at all, nor did Asava as well. So what are your thoughts here? First up in this particular ruck position.
Well, for some reason, I actually went to North Melbourne, Brisbane. So I can just say that it didn't suit Brisbane because it was bloody cold, but there was some misty rain around that third quarter, which wouldn't have suited Danaher. He did have some pretty close attention from Tarrant, so I wouldn't be that disappointed in Danaher. If there's a little bit of rain forecast up in Brisbane, though, I'll be a little bit nervous on how he was to go against the Cats because you know my thoughts on big forwards against the Cats, but I'm starting to waver a little bit on that. With Blixarve spending more time in the ruck, I'm not so scared. I lean to McInerney. He did get 33 hitouts. It was a pretty good game hitouts-wise for the ruckman last week, but they didn't really use them around the ground, either of those ruckmen, him or Goldstein. But I think he's going to dominate the hitouts here. So I'd lean to him over Blixarves, just because that price is starting to get a bit up for Blixarves. Not so keen on Radagalair, and I don't mind sprinkling Danaher. Interesting, Danaher was pretty good when these two teams played earlier in the year. He had 80-odd down there in Geelong. And he looked pretty hard for them to handle. So there it is, 81. That would be a pretty good return at his price. So, yeah, he's definitely in play.
Excellent. Would you consider a ruck stack quickly, yes or no?
Potentially. I'd be more keen if you could play Blixarves as a back, actually. Those stats you raised about backs being hard to come across, I thought, we could use Blixarves in the back line here with Oscar or rolling the dice on Danaher.
But
probably not.
More.
No, I'm not that wrapped in these rucks to play two of them, but yeah, we'll see how it goes.
All right, let's push on. So both teams, as I said earlier, they don't give up scoring the backs, and you've just alluded to a sentence ago. But the premium backs have actually done pretty well against these two sides. So if you go back to last week, you would have seen Zeeble easily rack up 124 against the Lions, and then obviously Hall had 98 as well. And then Caleb Daniel had 109, and Taylor Duray had 91 against the Cats as well. So there is potential for the premium backs here to control the footy and rack up those fancy points at back. But I can't really make a case for the lower end of town. Would that be a way to go about it?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. The safer options are the more expensive backs. But if you're down on backs as a collective, then maybe it's where you want to save a bit of cash. Tommy Atkins is a guy who I found a little bit tricky to catch, but at that price tag, you saw he had a good matchup last week against the Bulldogs. But earlier in the season, he did have 88 in this game between the two teams as well. So I think there's a bit of upside at his price there at 9,700. I'm pretty happy coming up with Atkins as a cheaper option. James Madden's a guy who is pretty new to things, so I think you see there he's got 3 scores in the 50s. We might see him sort of end up being more of a mid-$8,000 guy, so maybe he's a guy that the algorithm hasn't quite caught up to yet. But a lot of the usual suspects here down back in this game, and you know how much I love Tom Stewart, but yeah, you know how much I also don't love coming into guys who've just had a massive game and the price goes up and everyone's aware of them. So,
speaking of guys who've had a massive game, but the price hasn't really gone up. And he was pretty popular last week. Zach Tui.
Yep.
10,860. You have the flexibility of a defender or forward line here. 85 last week against the Dogs. Look, he's only just missed here with the one here at 56, and look at the rest of those scores there. So for a guy who's hovering around that 10K mark, I can't really get away from him, unfortunately. It would be okay for him to plug him in?
There's only 3 games there in the whole season that's really hurting you there at that $10,000 price tag. So very consistent, got a nice role. Yeah, he's one of the better options.
Excellent. All right, let's move on to the mids. Now, some outstanding options now that we've had a couple of injuries for either side. Obviously, we will touch on Geelong first, where we've lost Mitch Duncan to a serious knee injury. So, obviously, the opportunity goes to Cam Guthrie, but who else kind of plays that role? Because Mitch wasn't really an in and under guy, because obviously his CBA's reflected that since his return from his head knock. So, does that mean one of the guys who was on the outside come in, such like Smith or even Higgins, or should we just rely on the Dangerfields and the Selwoods of the world?
Well, it does present. There's a lot of sort of someone's got to play that link man that Duncan plays so well for them. A guy who seems like an obvious boost with Duncan out of the side is Menengola for me. He had a really good game from a fantasy perspective last week there with 111. You see there's some games through the middle of the year when they're a little bit undermanned, Geelong. So he is a bit hit or miss, but I do like his ceiling at that salary, Menengola. So I'll be taking the risk with a lot of him. One area to target the Brisbane Lions is in contested ball. They do a pretty good job of cutting down on uncontested ball. So I'm still looking at Guthrie. I'm still looking at Joel Selwood's getting a bit more expensive, but they have just kept him in the middle. So he's got the right role. Dangerfield's a really interesting one because he just looks rusty. It looks like he's just kicking a big sack every time he's kicking the ball at the moment. There's no sort of finesse to his game and hasn't been in that many centre bounces really, as they seem to be easing him back into things. One of these games he's going to explode, Dangerfield. I don't know if this is the one, but I just get the feeling once people start to get a bit sick of him, he's going to take off. So just bear that in mind for future weeks. I'm not sure that this is the game for it to happen, though.
I'm not sure, but when you think about it, I mean, who is his matchup if he's going to be inside 50? Because obviously you have Harris Andrews on Hawkins. You've got someone for Jeremy Cameron, Rowan, Dalhouse. There isn't really a guy for him in the defence of the Lions. Maybe Starcevic or someone like that. Do you have one off the top of your head?
No, he's a pretty hard matchup there. The guy you'd sort of think was a guy like Darcy Gardner, but he's out of the side. So you might be onto something there, Smatho. They might not have the right matchup for him down back, Dangerfield. But yeah, I just don't know if he's quite at the level yet. Maybe they even use a guy like Marcus Adams on him. I'm not sure.
We might be
not
going
to want to use Rich or Birchall, are they?
Yeah.
They might use Madden.
Yeah.
Oh, you found something there, Smatho. There's no obvious matchup for Dangerfield.
I don't know. Are we 1 week too early or are we going to be 1 week too late with Dangerfield?
Maybe everyone's thinking we're 1 week too early, Smatho, and this is the week to do it.
I mean, look at it. You got Lockie Neal at $100 cheaper. I mean, you're going to get ownership at low ownership, and you might want to plug him in your 40. I don't know. It's that could be the way to your golden ticket. You just don't know. But let's talk about Brisbane. Now, I touched on earlier, they didn't score really well against the Cats last time out back in round 2. Lions did have a 99, but look at his price. It's $16,000 there, coming off a huge 161 against the Kangas last week. The data saying that we can't really trust opposition midfielders against this Cats side, but could we pay up for Lions here?
So this is where we've been going against the data a little bit in recent weeks because the data doesn't dig down quite as far as we have been. Remember, we've done Geelong a few weeks on this show. We identified Wines, the inside bull, had a big game. Last week we talked about Bontempelli. We were a bit concerned with the O'Connor tag. Obviously that didn't come. Bontempelli's the big inside midfielder for the Bulldogs. He killed him. We've always touched on this. The really strong bullocking inside midfielder against Geelong can get off the leash. So I think Lions and Neil, you go back through the games that these two teams have played, it's Lions and Neil who have been the top scorers across the way. Thinking that O'Connor probably goes to Neil, I think I'm pretty happy playing Lions, to be honest. I think it sets up really well for him. 16,000 is expensive, but I think that's going to bring you a little bit lower ownership. Does love playing at the Gabba. Great role. Yeah, I can make a case for Lions for sure.
All right. So considering if we get Lions, what about the guys down the bottom here? Is there any Favourable value options here. We talked about Mark O'Connor. The one here that kind of burnt a lot of people here at 8,620 is Devon Robertson. How did you see his game last week?
I was surprised. Obviously, I watched the game live. You don't sort of notice the scores as much when you're watching at the ground. I was surprised he only had 57. He seemed like he was involved a fair bit. He had a really good finish to the game. He's one of those younger players that can just sort of pop off and exceed their salary as they're starting to build. You see the 4 weeks before, all 70 plus, really good scores at this price. I think he's going to be popular, but even though Zorko comes back into the team, Matheson was playing a similar role, so I don't think Robertson's role is going to change at all. I think it's he's pretty clearly one of the better, cheaper plays on the slate. Whether you go Robertson or O'Connor is going to be a really interesting decision. You see there, O'Connor's 3 of his last 4 scores are awful. So you'd think his ownership might be coming down, but if he gets that inside role running with Lockie Neal, we've seen him have those big scores in similar positions earlier in the year. So both are definitely in play for me. Probably, I don't know who I lean to. They're both probably pretty good plays, actually. Especially if you want to play Dangerfield up forward and you're happy just to spend up on, say, Lyons and Guthrie, and you play the two cheaper guys to go with them.
I like where you're going there.
Menegola too.
Yeah, I like where you're going there, but I reckon I'm just going to go for one for now and hedge my bets on Robertson. I'm going to get Joel Selwood in as well at 13,340. I think there's a lot of contested ball at this particular match. Yeah. And then one we haven't really touched on, you might want to touch here in the forwards, is Brendan Parfitt. So I'm going to put him in there for now. Tell me about Parfitt. He's going pretty well. Obviously a good game last week, but obviously the injury to Duncan is probably the little boost there from last week.
Yeah, it gives him a little bit more exposure through the middle of the ground, Parfitt. He's a very good tackler. He does have a decent, much like Menegola, he's got probably not the ceiling of Menegola, but he's close. He can get that hard you need to have the upside of that price. So, yeah, he's definitely in play, Parfitt.
Okay, let's touch on these forward options. Obviously, a stack of midfield options are available for forwards. Coming down, the Sean Higgins and Tom Hawkins are your first forward-only players. Poor old Tommy had a bit of a yo-yo game last week after going up so high. The Bulldogs shut him down. Old kick up the siren, Gary Rowan boosted his score by an extra 12 points after the final siren, so he's available at 9,520. But I've got a bit of cash here to spend, and the guy I'm pretty keen on here is Isaac Smith after his 97 last week. His scores are building there nicely. I reckon he has 100 in him in the confines of the Gabba ground. Tell me about your thoughts in terms of filling out this forward lineup for us.
Yeah, he does. We sort of mentioned he probably fits in to get some of that cheap ball that Duncan's not there to get. I want to throw one guy at you here because I've mentioned Harris Andrews, how not being that scared to play a key forward against him. Tom Hawkins is probably the guy that opened my eyes a bit to this. He's got hold of Harris Andrews a few times. So last time they played this year, he had an 83 Hawkins. Preliminary final last year, he had an 88. And then from memory, that game in Sydney, he had a 99. So that's 3 really – obviously those last 2 were in shortened quarters as well. So that's a really strong track record against the Lions here for Hawkins. Prices got down to in the $10,000 range. I'm pretty happy playing some Hawkins here. We talk about sprinkling key forwards. I'm getting a little bit more excited about Hawkins than just a sprinkle.
Now, also, if you're stuck for cash, is anyone down here in the value option that could get a run?
Oh, it's a raffle, isn't it?
Yeah.
I would
look at it.
Probably stay away from Dalehouse after his last week's score, just on ownership and sort of theory. It's going to be very hard for people not to put Dalehouse in off an 85 when you're trying to find a cheap guy, but you look there, he's just as likely to set fire to your lineup as he is to reproduce what he did last week.
I'm just doing some little muck around. So there it is. There's my team there. Tom Hawkins, Zach Tui now in the forward line, Menegola, Devon Robinson, Joel Seawood, Parfitt, Madden, Tommy Stewart, and Oscar McInerney. Oh, look, hopefully a few of them have a ceiling in them. This is more of your flashy kind of lineup, this one. But if you can tinker around and get your lines or your Gufferys in, then you're on your way to a nice score, that one. Any final thoughts on this particular slate, Hef?
No, we're earning our money this year on Thursday and Friday night games because we're getting lots of Geelong, lots of Brisbane. You need to get the guy. There's not obvious value in these matches. So like we say every week, give yourself a chance by playing a few of these guys with a big upside that aren't going to be smashed by everyone.
Okay, Hef, let's talk about Friday night AFL. Richmond Tigers taking on the St Kilda Saints at the MCG. The return of football to Melbourne. Currently, the Tigers are really short here, $1.15. Lines at 28.5, and the total is 158.5. As for the weather forecast, look, it is okay in Melbourne for this particular match. A typical winter's day, it looks like is forecasted. 10 mil of rain is on the forecast, but they reckon they'll get that early in the day. Expect to see a few long sleeves donned by the particular players for this particular match. Now, as we're recording on the show on Wednesday, we don't have the team news for this particular match, but we do have some news items that are worthy on this particular slate. The first one is with the Tigers coming off the bye. Look, to have Dion Prestia after his hamstring is probable to play, but obviously we'll have to find out in teams if he does get selected. Even at 1 hour before, they might make a decision then. Tom Lynch, Toby Nankervis, and Ivan Soto are still out, so they won't be back for the Tigers. Now, the Saints are going to get some big ins back. They're going to get Tim Membry. They're going to get Seb Ross after having their kids back here in Melbourne. They're also going to have Rowan Marshall back after having his surgery on his foot. He's going to be playing in this particular match. If there's a $75,000 prize pool up for grabs, let me bring up the Draftstars lobby. Any initial thoughts on this particular slate before I bring up the daily fantasy ranking notes?
Well, it's the time of year where Richmond start to get a move on. No doubt that West Coast loss would have stung them. They've had the bye to get over it, and now I think it's time. They're sitting 8th. It's time to put the Jets on and come home like we know they can. They get back to the MCG. They gave the Saints an absolute pummeling earlier in the season. Around 5, they beat them by about 80-something points. St Kilda, we know they're just hanging on at the moment. They seem to be a rabble. Some talk about players missing and whether people were happy with that or not. There's just not good news coming out of St Kilda at the moment. I think they're sort of sitting ducks for the Tigers, who are looking to kickstart the end of the season for them. So there'd be a few Richmond stacks, I would hazard a guess here.
It is a good guess, but if you do consult the notes here on Daily Fantasy Rankings, Tigers do slightly accumulate more possessions than the Saints, but it's very minor. Like I think it's like 2 on average, more possessions. So very similar setup here. The Tigers in the last 5 games have given up an average of 91 fantasy points to opposition rucks. So the loss in Nankervis is really starting to hurt their fantasy production for ruckman. Saints and Tigers are similar for midfielders in the league in the last 5 points against, as it goes to show, with possessions. And then the Saints are clearly equal second in the league for tackles. So obviously they're not having the ball at the moment. They need to tackle their way to get the ball back.
Jack Steele's got half of
it. Yes, he does. And he's no longer with the team. All right, so let's bring up the Draftstars lobby. We'll scroll down to Friday night, $75,000 contest. And a position I'm quite bullish already to start with, which is the rucks. It's highly likely we're going to get 3 choices here. Rowan Marshall at 12,310, Paddy Ryder at 11,910, and then Marble Chaw at 9,570. I just said the notes that the Tigers can't stop ruckman scoring fantasy points at the moment. So prices are pretty similar for Marshall and Ryder. Is there a case where you just have to choose one, or we do at the old El Paso chicken have both?
The what?
Why not both? Can we have Marshall in one and Paddy Ryan in the other? Why not both? Can't have.
Wow.
Nachos or tacos? What do you reckon?
Yeah, this is an interesting one because Marshall's coming back from injury. They've talked about managing his minutes. They also said that if they can't, then they won't worry about it. So make of that what you will. They're going to split the ruck, Marshall and Ryder. So that potentially caps the upside. You see Ryder's been very consistent there, but now he's near 12,000. Those scores don't really excite that much. I actually quite like maybe Orchol here. If you go and pull up his numbers, he's got the 97 in the middle, which is obviously a huge result at this price tag. That's against Essendon. 58 against Nick Natanui is far from disgraced. 62 against Riley O'Brien. Can't remember if that was... I think Nankervis was out for that game, but yeah, at 9K, I think you could definitely make a case for Charles. You can make a case for a ruck stack, maybe with him in the forward line. Ryder's pretty safe option. Marshall, we know Marshall can go big, but it's hard to really play a guy off first up off an injury if they're talking managed minutes at 12,000. Yeah, I actually have Charles number 1 here.
Oh.
One thing about St Kilda, we know they've got this combo, but they are third in the comp in points to opposition rucks as well, which is surprising.
It is surprising, but you reckon? The more you think about it, I think Charles can go with him, and
he's pretty mobile ruckman. Like they don't seem to use Coleman Jones at all in the ruck, do they? They run with Pickett. So Charles does get a lot of runs there. Yeah, anyone.
Any midfielder they can find.
Whoever's closest.
Sure. Yeah, whoever's closest. But
yeah, so
all right. I flopped here. I'll put Charles in for the moment. I'm pretty bullish on the other two, but I reckon for the sake of builds here, to save some money, I reckon we'll stick to Marble to start with. All right, let's have a look at the defense. Now, gone the days of Bashir Hooley at $10,000. He's been crept up to 12,840. But is he still playable at this price, or is it a little bit overpriced for you?
He's still playable for mine. I think that at his best, Hooley, that's still a little bit underpriced. I'm not scared at all to play Hooley. I'm going to cast your mind back, though, Smatho. When we talked about these teams earlier in the year, we targeted the St Kilda backs against Richmond. Now, there's also added opportunity here because Hunter Clark got his face broken last game, so he's not here, and he does tend to get a fair bit of the ball in the back line for St Kilda, so there's more ball to go around. I'm going to give you a little roughie. Nick Caulfield actually threw him out in round 5 when he was about 10,000, and that's his nice big 104 spike there, which was against Richmond. So similar matchup, no Hunter Clark there taking ball away. At 8,800, I think he's a really good sort of risk-reward prospect here, Caulfield. And Wilkie's a similar type of player. I prefer Caulfield over Wilkie. But if you are looking to save some cash through the back line, I think these, especially Caulfield, but I think they're both pretty good, cheaper options. Highmore's another one who did flash some pretty big upside there with that 110 against Adelaide in shocking conditions. But I wouldn't mind linking a couple of these Saints if they're just going to try and stem the flow against the Tigers here in the back line. If you link them up, then you might benefit if the game goes that way. So, yeah, obviously, Hooley, I love Hooley. We've talked about how much I love Hooley on this show, but I do like those cheap Saints backs here.
Right, let me put Nick in there and Callum. All right, there we go. Let's move on to your mids. So, as with the case of all season long, the Tigers mids are on the cheaper side. Every time we do a bit of a preview for these guys, they always seem to be low upside but low salary plays. Now, this slate's going to depend on Dion Prestia, really. Now, currently he is at 12,090. If he's in, he has that upside of 100 plus. He will probably lead the Tigers midfield fantasy scoring. If it's out, then you have to start looking again the likes of Shea Bolton, Dustin, even
Tichy.
the likes of Tichy, Camden, Caddy. I think Caddy played last round. So it all depends on press status, isn't it right?
Yeah, I tend to agree there. Especially Edwards has had a really good run of scores when they did have a couple of players out. Cochin is getting pretty cheap too, around the $10,000 mark. There's lots of options there for Richmond, and St Kilda's been a really good matchup all year for opposition midfielders. Your man Shea Bolton, he's flying. Dusty, what a great price for Dusty. You play them all, really.
Yeah,
you could play them all. I do like Steele and St Kilda. I do like playing Steele one out against a stack. He doesn't need. He gets so many tackles and whatever else. So if you are looking for a really heavy Richmond lineup and you want a Saints guy, I think if you don't want to go with those backs, I think Steele's my pick of the midfield, even at that price.
Even that price. Okay. Steele goes in. Any guys here of lesser value below this 10K mark? Riley
Collier-Dawkins is worth a look if he gets back into the team. I'm not sure that he will or not. That obviously depends on Prestia and what else they do. Jack Ross, similar story. But I think you can spread across those cheaper guys and you're going to be all right up forward.
All right. Let me feel this out then. I'll put Prestia in for now.
Sort of 10 to 12K guys. Yeah.
I'll leave those two for now. Let's move on to the forwards, and I'll fill this side out at the end of the show. Again, a lot of these DPP positions that you get left behind here. First guy back here is Tim Membry at 11,070. Bit of baby swag. Hef coming back into the Saints side against a pretty hard Tigers defense.
Is that a thing? I'm not sure I had a whole lot of swag once we had a couple of kids, but be more exhausted than anything. Let's scroll down the bottom, Smatho. I got one for you.
Mm-hmm.
There he is.
The bottom.
Daniel Rioli.
Oh, look at this. Okay.
Well, very sub-affected. He had a 46 there against the Eagles. His best score for the year, 66. Actually came against the Saints earlier in the year.
There it is.
6,000. He's pretty consistent around that sort of 40 through to 60 mark. 6,000, that's more than enough. Does play well at the G, plenty of space, and would benefit from Richmond giving them a hiding. So he's definitely a good option if you're looking to save cash, I think.
Any other options? Snag Higgins is also here at 10,208 against his old side. Does have good form here with 2 tons in a row.
Well, he's turned into some sort of Wayne Carey centre half forward for him, Snags Higgins, but I think this is... I don't know if he can go again. He'd be without me at 10,000 with just everyone wanting to play the guy coming off 200. So I'd be inclined to fade Higgins. I'd prefer to be playing even Jack Riewoldt, who did go really well against the Saints earlier in the year and has done in past years as well. And obviously no Lynch there. He's a bit up and down, but at his price, I think he's definitely worth a try. Riewoldt. And then obviously you've got guys like Shea Bolton and Dusty that you can roll through your forward line if you've got some money to spend like you actually do at the moment, Smatho.
Yeah, I'm kind of torn here at the moment. So I'm thinking I can put Shy. I've already got Shy here. I might have to take him out and put him off forward line. I had the idea of doing a double ruck stack, but you kind of just burst my bubble there. Yeah. And then I just realised, hey, the Tigers are 6-goal favourite. So I need to have a bit more Richmond in my life.
Some Shea, some Dustin, some Lambert, just Titchy, just gorge yourself, Smatho.
All right, here we go, Titchy. Does that leave him with Dustin? It does, with $900 to spare to muck around with that.
It's probably not worth putting another team in if you're watching, because that has got the mustard.
I'll be putting 100 head-to-heads in now. Take me on, because that's excellent. All right. There we go, Hef. All right, there we go. So that's 2 games. That's Thursday and Friday, round 15. A preview for Draftstars. Make sure you get the draftstars.com.au to enter all the variety of contests you can win cash on. Make sure you look for the qualifiers if you want to get that golden ticket to the Draftstars Live Final. And before you put your lineups in, you must go to dailyfantasyrankings.com.au and check out all the previews and the data tools for free. It doesn't cost you a thing like watching this show. This is all free content for AFL Daily Fantasy. We enjoy doing it, don't we, Hef?
Absolutely. Some say it's expensive, but I think it's well priced.
It is well priced. All right. Thanks for all the viewers who've watched the show or even listened to the show via podcast. Give us a little bit of likes up, like on your way out. We'll be back for around 16. I do believe it's another Thursday game. They haven't actually released a fixture yet, haven't they? For next sheet. Have they done that yet?
I'll just wait for you to tell me when we're on, Smatho. So I'll go and have a look.
All right. Now, Hef always looks at the Twitter socials for his information, so make sure you swing by there. So, mate, thanks for joining on the show, mate.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone. See you next week.
See you next week. Take it easy.